The mysterious Deathworlder arrival. The alien military base was unlike any other. Towering structures of strange, shimmering metal reached for the sky, and the air smelled of synthetic fuel and the sharp tang of energy fields. The base was bustling with activity as alien cadets prepared for their training. Today, however, something was different, something that made the usually confident drill sergeants uneasy. A new recruit was arriving, but this wasn't just any recruit. This one was human. A species known to be primitive, still clinging to old technologies, and regarded by the rest of the galaxy as weak. The alien race that dominated the military knew this well. They had never faced any real threat from humans. But today, the aliens would find out just how wrong their assumptions were. The Deathworlder, as the humans had come to be known, stepped off the transport ship. The air around him seemed to ripple with energy, like the very atmosphere recoiled from his presence. He was taller than most humans, his muscles defined under the tight military uniform. His eyes, dark and intense, scanned the surroundings with a calmness that was almost unnerving. As he stepped onto the training grounds, the alien instructors took notice. They had been briefed on his arrival, but they couldn't believe it until they saw him with their own eyes. The humans, after all, had no place in their world. Their weapons were outdated, their technology primitive. Yet this human had been chosen for an elite training course designed for the strongest of the strong. The program was meant to push cadets to their limits, body, mind, and spirit. Only the toughest of warriors ever made it through, and even they collapsed from exhaustion. The first of the drill sergeants, an alien with 4 arms and the ability to shift its form, sneered as the human cadet approached. Another one, it muttered under its breath. The rest of the aliens watching exchanged uneasy glances. It had been centuries since a human had attempted such a course. They were curious, yes, but not worried. They expected the human to fail, just as every other human before him had. The human's name was John, but to the aliens, he was just another Deathworlder, a species known for surviving on harsh, unforgiving planets. It was this reputation that led to the humans being seen as dangerous, but still beneath the other, more advanced species. John, however, knew something the aliens did not. He knew that survival was just the beginning. It was the will to fight and push forward that truly mattered, and that's why he was here. The base fell into an uneasy silence as the sergeant in charge of the day's training, an imposing 6-legged creature with glowing blue eyes, walked toward John. This sergeant had a reputation for breaking cadets. No one had ever completed the course while under his watch. "You are human?" the sergeant asked, its voice mechanical, cold. It wasn't a question of curiosity, but of sheer disbelief. John nodded. "That's right," he replied simply. "You are aware of the difficulty of this training." The sergeant's voice had an edge to it now, like it was testing John's resolve. "Many have come before you. Few have lasted the full week. Many are not heard from again." John didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto the sergeant's, the determination in them clear. "I'm ready." The sergeant scoffed. "Ready? You are nothing but an insect compared to the warriors who will face you in this training. Do you know what you're up against? Our training program is brutal. It's designed to push even the most elite beings to the brink of death. The heat, the combat, the mental strain, it breaks most." John's expression remained unchanged. "I'm not most," he said calmly. "You'll see." The alien sergeant paused. There was something about the human's tone, the unwavering confidence, that made it stop for a moment. The others had underestimated humans before, but they never dared to question their strength in the way this human did. Behind John, a large display screen lit up, showing the first phase of the training. The challenge was one of the most difficult, a combat simulation against the most advanced alien combat drones ever designed. These drones could adapt to any fighting style, and they were fast, relentless, and armed with the latest technology. Most cadets were either overwhelmed or killed within the first few minutes, but John wasn't fazed. He stared at the screen, as if already seeing his next moves. "This will be your first test," the surgeon said, turning to face the others. "You have 1 hour. Fail, and we will discard you. That's the deal. Do you understand?" John nodded. "I understand." Without further delay, the training began. John stepped forward into the simulation room, where the ground beneath his feet was hard and unforgiving. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the bright red glow of the alien combat drones. There was no room for hesitation. The air crackled with the sounds of energy weapons charging. The alien surgeons watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and doubt. They expected failure, but as John moved swiftly through the simulation, defeating the drones with ease, their skepticism turned into something else. Was it possible that this human could truly survive the trials? The lead surgeon turned to the others, his eyes narrowing. Something was off. This human wasn't just surviving. He was thriving, and he was doing it faster, more efficiently than anyone had expected. As John fought on, his heart pounding in his chest, the aliens watched in stunned silence. No one had ever done this before. Could a human truly change the course of their training program? Or would he, too, fall like the others before him? The Deathworlder had arrived, and the aliens were beginning to understand. They had no idea what they were truly up against. The first challenge, unlikely victory. The air in the combat simulation room was thick with tension. John, the human Deathworlder, stood in the center of the training arena, waiting. Around him, the alien combat drones hovered in the air, their mechanical eyes scanning for movement. The arena was designed to test every skill a cadet could possibly possess: strength, speed, endurance, and mental acuity. The drills had been set, and the first challenge was about to begin. From the observation deck above, the alien drill surgeons leaned forward, their multiple eyes trained on John. The humans, in their primitive state, had no business being here. They were supposed to be easy targets, no match for the advanced drones and the intricacies of the alien combat protocols. But John stood still, his eyes closed, focusing on the sounds around him. The air was dense with the hum of the drones, and the ground was a sterile white, meant to confuse and disorient those who couldn't handle high-stakes combat. To anyone else, the drones would seem impossible to defeat, but to John, this was just another day. The countdown timer appeared in the air, floating above him, ticking down from 60 minutes. In a standard training course, it would take cadets the entire hour to survive just the first phase, if they survived at all. The drones were highly advanced, armed with weapons designed to overwhelm the toughest of opponents. The task wasn't just survival, it was to fight back. Without a moment's hesitation, John opened his eyes. The countdown clock flickered as he immediately reacted, his reflexes as sharp as a predator's. The drones came at him with terrifying speed, charging forward with the purpose of overwhelming him all at once. They fired their energy weapons, each shot a searing blast of light aimed directly at him. John moved with the kind of speed the aliens hadn't expected. He didn't run or dodge like a mere human would. He anticipated the drone's movements, cutting through the air with precision. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a blast from a drone's energy rifle. His hand shot out, and within seconds, he disarmed one of the drones, tearing its weapon from its metallic hand. It crumpled to the ground as John spun and hurled the weapon back at the next drone, the impact causing it to explode. The drill surgeons watching above exchanged glances, their collective unease growing. They had expected the human to panic, to stumble under the pressure of multiple attacking drones. Instead, he moved like a creature born to battle, his every move calculated and deliberate. John was no stranger to combat. His world, Earth, was a death world, dangerous, hostile, filled with creatures that could tear a person apart with ease. The environment alone had shaped humans into resilient, brutal survivors. They were the apex predators of their planet, and John had learned to use his surroundings to his advantage. The drones continued to attack, but John moved faster than they could react. He took out 2 more, using his instincts to anticipate their movements. With each passing second, it became clear that John was more than capable of handling the challenge. The drones, once an overwhelming force, were now on the defensive, trying desperately to adapt to his movements. Back in the observation room, the alien surgeons were beginning to grow concerned. The challenge had been set to test a cadet's ability to survive. It was never meant to be winnable. But John wasn't just surviving. He was dominating. "You see," said one of the surgeons, his voice a low growl. "He's far too strong. We need to up the ante." The lead surgeon nodded, his eyes narrowing. He tapped a few buttons on his control panel. From beneath the floor of the simulation room, a loud mechanical noise echoed. A massive figure began to rise from the ground, a drone unlike any the cadets had faced before. This one was heavily armored, towering above John and the other drones, with an energy cannon mounted on its arm. The other drones immediately took a step back, allowing the new, more dangerous opponent to step forward. It was clear that this would be the final test, the true test of John's capabilities. The Deathworlder didn't flinch. Instead, he focused on the new threat, sizing it up, and the drill surgeons watched with growing anticipation. As the massive drone raised its cannon to fire, John made his move. He dashed toward it at a speed that seemed impossible, closing the distance between them faster than anyone could follow. The drone fired, but John was already behind it. He dove between its legs, dodging its attack, and with a powerful twist, he planted his feet on the ground and launched himself upward. With a swift strike, John grabbed the drone's cannon arm and wrenched it off, throwing the massive piece of machinery to the ground. In an instant, John delivered a powerful punch to the drone's core, causing a shockwave of energy to ripple outwards. The drone buckled, its systems failing as it collapsed to the floor. The simulation room fell silent, and the timer showed that John had completed the entire challenge in less than 20 minutes. The alien drill surgeons were speechless. They had never seen anything like it. The human cadet had not only survived the most difficult task in the training program, but he had also finished it in a fraction of the time that was deemed possible. They had believed the challenge was unbeatable, but John had shattered that belief in mere minutes. The lead surgeon's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "This cannot be. How?" John wiped his brow, a faint smirk on his face. He was tired, but it wasn't the exhaustion of a beaten warrior. It was the exhaustion of someone who had just completed a training course the way it was meant to be done, efficiently. "We're not the weaklings you think we are," John said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable confidence. The drill surgeons stared at him, unsure of what to make of this human. They had always considered the Deathworlders as inferior beings, far behind the aliens in terms of strength and skill. But John had just proved them wrong. The aliens were starting to realize something. The humans were not to be underestimated. The growing fear of the aliens. The combat simulation room was now a mess of sparks, broken drones, and mechanical wreckage scattered across the floor. John stood among the debris, sweat glistening on his forehead, his chest heaving slightly from the exertion. The alien drill surgeons, still observing from their control deck above, were in stunned silence. They had expected to see the human fail, as the others had before him. But instead, John had defied every expectation. Not only had he survived, but he had completed the challenge in a fraction of the time. The lead surgeon was the first to speak, his voice low and filled with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "This human, it's impossible. He should not have been able to do that. None of our cadets, none of the strongest beings we have ever accomplished this." The others muttered among themselves, their voices tinged with unease. They had always viewed humans as weak, primitive creatures, barely worth their attention. But what they were witnessing now was changing everything. Down in the training arena, John wiped his hands on his uniform, shaking off the sweat. He wasn't tired. In fact, he was just getting started. This was what he lived for, pushing his body to the limit and showing that the Deathworlders, despite being considered primitive, had a strength that no alien species could match. He had trained on Earth, a planet filled with danger, predators, and environments that would tear other beings apart. He had learned to fight, to survive, and to adapt. And that's what had kept humanity on top, no matter how much the galaxy looked down on them. A soft beep came from the control panel, and the lead surgeon turned to see the results of John's performance displayed in front of him. The numbers were staggering. The time it took to defeat the drones was nearly half of what any other cadet had managed. The damage inflicted on the drones was far beyond what was expected. Even the massive, heavily armored drone that John had faced had been torn apart with ease. "This cannot go on," the lead surgeon muttered to himself. "The human is too strong. We can't allow this." The tension among the drill surgeons was palpable. Their training program was designed to test the most skilled warriors from across the galaxy, but none of them had ever encountered a being like John. What made it worse was that John wasn't just surviving their tests. He was excelling at them, and it was happening so quickly that the aliens could barely process what was going on. The next phase of the training was approaching, and the lead surgeon knew that they had to act quickly. They couldn't let this human continue to pass through their challenges with ease. They had to do something to stop him. "I want the next test prepared," the lead surgeon ordered, his tone sharp. "We'll need to raise the difficulty level, double the number of drones, increase the combat level, push him to his absolute limit." The other drill surgeons nodded, their eyes filled with a growing fear. They had underestimated John, but now they were beginning to realize that humanity's strength was not just in their physicality. It was in their ability to adapt, to think on their feet, and to overcome the impossible. If they didn't do something drastic, this human might just break their entire training program. Meanwhile, John stood at the center of the room, his body relaxed but alert. He knew what was coming. He could feel the atmosphere change, the tension in the air, the heavy silence. The aliens had watched him, studied him, and now they were preparing for the next phase. He didn't know exactly what they had in store for him, but it didn't matter. Whatever they threw at him, he would face it head-on. John had spent his whole life on Earth, a planet that was often considered too dangerous for most species to even think about. But humans had survived and thrived against all odds. It was this kind of resilience that he had been taught from a young age. No matter how strong the enemy was, no matter how tough the challenge, you never gave up. You adapted, you learned, and you fought until you were victorious. The lead surgeon turned back to the screen, watching John's calm demeanor. "There's something unsettling about him," he muttered. "He's not afraid, not even a little, and he's not stopping." "Should we increase the difficulty of the training?" asked one of the other surgeons, voice unsure. The lead surgeon considered it for a moment, his gaze fixed on the human standing in the arena. "Yes," he finally said. "We'll push him to the brink. If he can survive this next test, we may have to reconsider our entire approach. But for now, let's make sure he understands that Deathworlders do not belong in our program." The decision was made. The next challenge would be far worse than anything John had faced so far. The drones would increase in numbers, their tactics would become more complex, and the alien technology at their disposal would be pushed to its limits. But John wasn't worried. In fact, he was looking forward to it. Back in the observation deck, as the preparations for the next phase began, the other alien drill surgeons gathered around the lead surgeon, discussing the unprecedented situation. They had always prided themselves on their advanced training methods, but John's performance was forcing them to rethink everything. "He's not just fast," one of the surgeons said. "He's strategic. The way he moved, he didn't just react, he anticipated. He knew exactly where the drones would be and when they would attack." The lead surgeon nodded grimly. "Yes, it's like he's been here before, like he's faced these kinds of challenges in his own world. We've underestimated them, and now we're seeing the result." Another surgeon leaned forward, What if he completes this next test, too? What does that mean for the rest of the program? What if we can't break him? The lead surgeon remained silent for a moment, staring at the human through the observation window. He was beginning to realize that John wasn't just a physical threat. He was an intellectual one, too. His ability to outthink and outmaneuver the drones was something the aliens had never considered before. "I don't know," the lead surgeon said finally, "but I think we've made a grave mistake." John was ready. He was just getting started. And the aliens were about to learn what happens when you push a Deathworlder too far. The next challenge, a test, like no other. John stood still, listening to the hum of the machines around him. The arena, once littered with the remains of destroyed drones, now felt eerily quiet. The silence was broken by the sudden sound of mechanical doors sliding open, revealing the new set of drones. These were larger, more menacing, their armor gleaming with alien technology, and they moved in perfect synchronization. John's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation, his mind already calculating his next move. The aliens had underestimated him before, but they had learned from their mistake. Now they were throwing everything they had at him. They were no longer relying on the usual drone tactics. This time, they were deploying a new wave of drones that combined advanced weaponry with unpredictable behavior patterns. It was the most difficult challenge they had ever created, and they were certain it would break him. John's eyes flickered as he mentally prepared for what was to come. He wasn't intimidated by the size or strength of the new drones. The Deathworlders didn't back down. He had faced far worse back on Earth, a planet filled with dangers that would make most alien species tremble in fear. But it wasn't just the strength of his enemies that mattered. It was his ability to adapt, to outthink and outmaneuver them. The aliens might have superior technology, but John had the advantage of instinct and experience. The lead drill surgeon watched from the observation deck, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "Let's see how he handles this," he muttered. "The Deathworlder has made it through the first test, but this one will be different." John didn't waste any time. The moment the drones advanced, he moved. With speed and precision, he darted toward the nearest drone, ducking low to avoid the laser fire. His hands gripped the control panel of a nearby weapons rack, pulling out a sharp, jagged blade. It wasn't the most advanced weapon, but it was more than enough for John. He had trained in every environment imaginable, including ones where technology was scarce, and he had learned to use his surroundings to his advantage. One of the drones lunged at him, its mechanical arm swinging down with crushing force. John ducked, rolling to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. His blade connected with the drone's leg, and sparks flew as the metal screeched under the pressure. The drone staggered, but John was already moving again, using the moment of vulnerability to his advantage. He sliced through another drone's energy core, and the entire machine collapsed, smoke rising from its shattered frame. The aliens in the observation deck watched in shock. They had expected him to be fast, but not this fast. John wasn't just dodging and attacking. He was reading their movements, anticipating their next steps, and using the drone's own momentum against them. It was like he was inside their minds, predicting their every move. "What is he doing?" one of the aliens asked, his voice tinged with panic. "How is he able to keep up with them?" "This is impossible." The lead surgeon's face tightened. "It's like he's studying them, learning from every move they make. We need to change the rules." John, meanwhile, was in his element. His muscles were burning from the exertion, but his mind was sharper than ever. He had spent years pushing his body to the limit, training to be faster, stronger, and more resilient. This was nothing compared to the challenges he had faced back on Earth. These drones may have been powerful, but they were predictable. He could outsmart them. He could outrun them. Suddenly, the drones began to shift tactics. The lead surgeon's voice came over the intercom, and John could hear the cold satisfaction in his tone. "Deploy the new model. Activate the swarm." A new wave of drones entered the arena. These were different. Smaller, faster, and much more unpredictable. They didn't follow the same combat protocols. They moved erratically, making it much harder to predict their movements. They were designed to overwhelm John, to force him into a corner where he would be outnumbered and outgunned. The aliens were hoping that the sheer number of drones would break him, that his human instincts would falter under pressure. John's eyes widened for a moment, but only out of respect for the challenge. This was new. This was different. But it wasn't anything he couldn't handle. He had faced overwhelming odds before, and he had always found a way through. He had to stay focused. His training had prepared him for moments like this. He couldn't afford to panic. The swarm of drones came at him from all directions. Their movements were erratic, but John quickly adapted. He darted left and right, his body moving fluidly, dodging lasers and missiles, getting closer to each drone with every passing second. With each one he took down, his confidence grew. He had always been quick, but now he was beginning to feel like he was moving faster than the drones themselves. A drone lunged at him from behind, but John spun around just in time, using the momentum to disarm the machine and send it crashing to the ground. He was relentless. He was unstoppable. Every blow he struck seemed to take down another enemy. And yet, the drones kept coming. It was as if the aliens had no end to their arsenal. But John wasn't backing down. He knew that every second he spent in this arena brought him closer to the moment when he would show the aliens just how wrong they were about humans. He was more than just a soldier. He was a survivor. He was a Deathworlder. And the aliens would learn the hard way what that meant. Back in the observation deck, the surgeons were in a state of panic. John was handling the swarm with ease. It was becoming clear that he wasn't just defeating the drones, he was outsmarting them. They had no way of knowing what to do next. One of the surgeons turned to the lead surgeon, his voice trembling. "We need to call this off. If he keeps this up, we'll lose everything." But the lead surgeon didn't respond. He was watching John, his gaze hardening. This human was more dangerous than they had anticipated. He wasn't just a brute force. He was tactical, intelligent, and fearless. The alien forces had never faced anything like him before. "Let's see how long he can keep it up," the lead surgeon said. His voice was cold, but there was a hint of uncertainty there. The real test is coming. The unexpected twist. John was getting tired. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp. The constant onslaught of drones had drained his energy, and the weight of the situation began to set in. The alien forces were relentless. No matter how many he destroyed, more kept coming. The swarm was never ending. John had never been in a situation like this before. He darted across the arena, weaving through blasts of energy fire. His pulse quickened as he took down drone after drone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The aliens had set this up to break him, but they weren't just testing his strength and speed. They were watching, observing how he handled the pressure. John wasn't just a subject in a training simulation anymore. He was a puzzle, a challenge they wanted to solve. The leader of the alien forces, still in the observation deck, leaned forward, watching John's every move. "He's beginning to wear down. We need to push him further. Make him realize he's not in control." The lead drill sergeant turned to his subordinates, his face cold and calculating. "Deploy the new weapon. It's time to see if he truly understands the consequences of this challenge." John heard a low mechanical hum in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of massive doors opening. He turned, eyes narrowing, as something much larger and far more menacing entered the arena. It was a machine, towering over him by at least 10 feet. Its surface was sleek, black and reflective, covered in glimmering alien symbols. The weapon wasn't just a drone. It was something far more advanced. It looked like a hybrid of technology and bioengineering, designed with one purpose: to defeat John once and for all. For the first time since he had arrived on the alien world, John felt a pang of doubt. This was different. This was something he had never encountered. The alien machine's design seemed both chaotic and perfect, combining strength with speed, brute force with precision. John didn't waste time thinking about it. His body was already moving before his mind fully caught up. He ducked beneath the machine's first swing, feeling the rush of wind as its massive fist barely missed him. He sprang back, adrenaline surging through his veins, but as he glanced up, he saw the machine coming at him again, faster this time. It moved like a living thing, its massive frame gliding smoothly across the arena as it adjusted its movements mid-swing. The alien weapon wasn't like the other drones. It was smart. It was adaptable. It learned, just like John. His heart hammered in his chest. For the first time, he felt a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about proving that he, a human, could survive against the best technology the aliens could throw at him. He had to think faster, move faster. John slid under the machine's next attack, rolling across the floor to a weapons rack on the far side of the arena. His hand gripped a pulse rifle, and without hesitation, he fired a shot directly at the machine's center. The blast hit its target, but to his surprise, the weapon didn't even flinch. Instead, the machine let out a low growl, and its surface began to shimmer with an energy field. The alien machine was shielded. John's heart skipped a beat as he realized that no ordinary weapon would work against it. This wasn't a normal enemy. This was something far more advanced, designed to counter everything he had done up until now. The drill sergeants on the observation deck exchanged glances. They were watching closely, trying to gauge how John would react. The lead surgeon's voice was tinged with an edge of curiosity. Let's see what he does next. This is his breaking point. John gritted his teeth. He couldn't just keep fighting the machine with brute strength. He had to outsmart it, just like he had done with the drones. He needed to find its weakness, its flaw. The alien machine was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. No creation could be. He ducked behind a large piece of metal debris, buying himself a few precious moments to think. His mind raced as he analyzed the machine's movements, looking for patterns. He knew it had a limited range of motion, and there was a slight delay whenever it changed direction. That was his opening. If he could exploit that delay, he might have a chance. John didn't hesitate. He sprinted out from behind the cover, charging directly at the machine. As he approached, he dodged to the side, barely avoiding another crushing blow. He was close now, so close he could almost feel the heat from the machine's energy field. His fingers brushed the edge of a blade lying on the ground, and without thinking, he grabbed it. He didn't need a pulse rifle anymore. He needed precision. With the blade in hand, John launched himself at the machine's exposed side. The moment it tried to turn to face him, he struck, jamming the blade into a small opening in its armor. Sparks erupted from the hole, and for a moment, the machine faltered, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. John didn't stop. He pulled the blade free and struck again, this time aiming for the energy core at the center of the machine's chest. The machine's arm swung at him, but he was already out of the way, dodging with a precision that was almost impossible to match. Another strike, and the core began to crack. The alien machine let out a mechanical screech as it powered down, its systems failing one by one. The arena was silent except for John's heavy breathing, the only sound in the chaos he had just survived. The lead sergeant looked stunned. He had thought this would be the end. Instead, John had outsmarted the machine, finding its weakness where others would have failed. The humans weren't just survivors. They were something else. They were unpredictable. They were dangerous. John stood in the center of the arena, the broken remains of the alien machine lying at his feet. He wasn't just a Deathworlder. He was proving to the aliens that humanity had a place in the universe, and it wasn't one they could take lightly. The true test begins. John stood over the fallen remains of the alien machine, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. He had just defeated what was supposed to be the ultimate test, but he knew, deep down, that it wasn't over yet. The aliens would not let him win so easily. No, this was just the beginning of something much larger. A sudden hum filled the air, and John instinctively crouched, ready for whatever came next. The walls of the arena started to shift, and the ground beneath him began to tremble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was something much more calculated. John's eyes darted around, looking for a clue, anything that would help him prepare. Then the floor split open. Out of the massive crevice, a new threat emerged. The alien forces weren't going to hold back anymore. This wasn't another drone or a malfunctioning machine. This time, the enemy was alive, and it was unlike anything John had ever seen before. The creature that climbed out of the fissure was a massive, insectoid being. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, with armored exoskeletons and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the dim lights of the arena. Its claws clicked menacingly against the ground, and its mandibles snapped, making an eerie clicking sound. The alien beast was as terrifying as it was strange, with long, sinewy legs that could probably tear John apart in seconds. John's mind raced. The creatures from Deathworld were terrifying, but this alien was on a whole different level. John had no experience fighting something like this. Its speed, strength, and sheer size were beyond anything he had encountered in the training facility. "You've faced machines. Now face what we are truly capable of," came the voice from the observation deck. The aliens were watching again, but this time, there was no hint of curiosity in their tone. It was a command, a challenge. John's body tensed, but there was no fear in his eyes. He wasn't about to back down now. He had survived the machines. He had survived the drills. He wasn't going to let an alien predator be his downfall. Not today. The creature lunged at John, its movements swift and calculated. John barely had time to react, ducking under the attack, feeling the air rush past him as the creature's claws missed by mere inches. He rolled to his feet and grabbed the nearest weapon, a large, jagged blade that had been left on the ground after the last battle. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. With a deep breath, John rushed forward, aiming for the creature's midsection, but it was faster than he had anticipated. The creature's long, whip-like tail swept out, knocking John off his feet and sending him sprawling across the arena floor. His head slammed against the cold metal surface, and for a moment, everything went dark. He could taste blood in his mouth, but the pain didn't matter. He had to keep fighting. The alien monster turned its massive head toward John, its eyes narrowing as it prepared to finish him off. John's heart pounded in his chest. He had to do something, anything, before it was too late. The alien's sheer size and strength were overwhelming, but John wasn't going to let that stop him. In a burst of adrenaline, John sprang to his feet, using the momentum of his recovery to deliver a devastating blow to the alien's face. His blade struck the creature's armored head with a force that should have left it stunned. But the armor held, and John felt the blade slide off without leaving a scratch. The creature shrieked, frustrated. Its claws reached for John, but he managed to dodge just in time. This time, John had learned from his mistake. He wasn't just going to fight back with brute force. He had to outsmart the creature. He had to use his surroundings to his advantage. John's eyes flicked around the arena, searching for something, anything, that could turn the tide of the battle. That's when he saw it. On the far side of the arena, there was a large pile of debris, stacked high like a makeshift wall. If he could reach it, there was a chance he could trap the creature. He just had to make it there. The alien creature, sensing John's intent, charged at him again, but John was ready this time. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, using the creature's momentum against it. The massive alien beast stumbled forward, crashing into the debris pile with a resounding crash. John seized the opportunity. He sprinted toward the pile, climbing the debris with remarkable speed. His hands were shaking, but he kept his focus. As the creature struggled to free itself, John grabbed a large piece of metal from the pile and positioned it over the opening in the creature's armor. The beast thrashed beneath him, but it couldn't reach John in time. With a determined yell, John hurled the metal shard downward, plunging it into the weak point of the creature's armor. The beast howled in pain, its massive body jerking violently before it collapsed onto the ground, its movements slowing. John's heart raced, but he didn't dare let his guard down. The creature was still alive, but it was weakened. John knew he had only moments before it tried to recover. He lunged forward, grabbing the jagged blade again, and aimed for the creature's neck. One final strike, and the creature would be finished. As the blade sank into the alien's neck, the creature let out a final guttural cry. Its body went limp, and the arena fell silent. John stood over the fallen alien, his body trembling from exhaustion. He had done it. He had defeated the creature, but the victory didn't come easily. He had been pushed to his absolute limits. There was no time to rest. The aliens had thrown everything at him, but they weren't done yet. He looked up at the observation deck, his eyes narrowing. The aliens were watching. But this time, their expressions were not of smug superiority. There was something different in their eyes, something that John recognized. Fear, the final test. The silence in the arena was deafening. John stood over the fallen alien, breathing heavily, but his mind was already racing. He had defeated the beast, barely, but he knew the hardest part wasn't over. The aliens had watched his every move. They had seen how he handled their most dangerous creations, and now John could feel the weight of their eyes, cold and calculating, as they waited for his next move. But John wasn't the one who would be waiting this time. He had proven his strength, his resilience, and his ability to adapt. He was no longer a mere test subject. He was a force they could not ignore. The walls of the arena shifted, and John's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? The final challenge? From the shadows, a massive door slid open. The ground rumbled beneath him, and John instinctively dropped into a low stance, his eyes scanning for any sign of what was about to come. The light dimmed, and an eerie, unnatural fog began to pour into the arena. The atmosphere shifted, as if the entire space had become a battleground, not just for survival, but for supremacy. John tightened his grip on the jagged blade, preparing for whatever came next. The aliens were no longer just testing his physical abilities. They were testing his mind. His every move would be watched, and whatever was coming through that door wasn't going to play by any rules. Then, a voice boomed over the arena, low and resonant, echoing off the walls. "Deathworlder, you have impressed us. But now, you face your true challenge. You face the ultimate." John's jaw clenched. The words were not a promise. They were a threat, and he knew, deep down, that he had no choice but to face whatever came next. The fog parted, and from within, a figure emerged, tall, armored, and imposing. John's breath caught as he saw the shape fully. This was no alien beast. It was something much worse. A humanoid alien, dressed in black, its armor glinting with sharp, deadly edges. Its helmet was sleek and dark, with no visible face. Its entire presence exuded power, control, and a cold, calculated menace. The figure's footsteps were slow but deliberate, echoing through the arena with each movement. John's instincts screamed at him to act, but he held still. He had learned the hard way not to rush into things without thinking. This wasn't just another test. This was a battle for his very survival. The alien's voice cut through the tension. "I am the last of the true elite. You will face me now. And should you survive, you will prove that Deathworlders are a force to be reckoned with." John's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a fight for pride. This was a fight for his life. He could sense the weight of the alien's words, the gravity of the challenge. If he failed here, everything he had endured, the machines, the beasts, the endless training, would have been for nothing. The ground beneath them shifted again, and John's attention snapped back to the alien. Without warning, the alien lunged forward, its speed taking John by surprise. The blade in John's hand barely had time to react as the alien's gauntleted fist smashed into his ribs, sending a wave of pain coursing through his body. John stumbled backward, his breath knocked out of him. But he didn't fall. John recovered quickly, his feet planting firmly on the ground as he turned to face the alien again. His head was throbbing, but the fire in his chest burned hotter now. He could feel it. The alien had underestimated him, and that was going to be its biggest mistake. The alien pressed forward again, moving with unnatural speed. John dodged the first strike, but the second one came faster, aimed straight for his chest. John had no time to block, but at the last moment, his instincts kicked in. He sidestepped, letting the alien's fist fly past him. As it did, John's blade slashed through the air, catching the alien's exposed side. The alien let out a low growl of frustration, stepping back and examining the fresh wound on its armor. John didn't hesitate. He pressed the advantage, leaping forward with a powerful strike aimed at the alien's head. The blade met its mark, but the alien's armor was tough, and the blow only left a shallow scratch. The alien hissed in anger and launched itself at John, its fists like battering rams. John barely managed to block the next strike with his blade, feeling the shock of the impact rattle through his arms. He was fast, faster than the alien anticipated, but not fast enough. John's mind raced. He needed to think of a way to end this. He needed to outsmart the alien. His strength alone wasn't enough. He had to do something the alien wouldn't expect. His eyes darted around the arena again, looking for anything that might give him an edge. That's when he saw it. Above them, a series of support beams crisscrossed the ceiling, hanging precariously above the arena floor. The alien was fast, but it wasn't looking up. John knew what he had to do. With all his remaining strength, John ducked beneath the alien's next strike. Then, in a flash, he dashed towards one of the support beams. He leaped up, grabbing hold of it with both hands, swinging his body onto the beam above. The alien turned, confused for just a moment, before it launched itself into the air after him. John grinned. He swung his legs up, kicking the nearby crate loose. The crate crashed down on the alien, knocking it off balance. John used the opening to swing down with the full force of his body, plunging the blade deep into the alien's chest. The alien's body froze for a moment before it fell to the ground with a heavy thud. John stood over it, chest heaving, his mind racing with adrenaline. The aliens in the observation deck had fallen silent. John had won. But as he caught his breath, John couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. He had passed the test, but the aliens weren't the type to just give up. The true war was still coming, and humanity was ready.